Welcome to episode 265 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm all right, Rob. How are you doing?
Doing okay. We are more than halfway through CppCon 2020, the first virtual CppCon. I think it's going pretty well.
End of the day Thursday for specifics there.
Yeah. And, normally we do try to get a couple in-person interviews when we attend CppCon. Obviously, we can't do that. No one's in person, but we still wanted to get a couple interviews in this week. So this first one we're going to have is with a bunch of the Microsoft team. They put on several talks this week, and I guess we'll go ahead and introduce everyone, right?
Go for it.
All right. So first we have Julia Reid. Julia is a program manager on the C++ team at Microsoft, focusing specifically on Visual Studio Code experiences. Hey, Julia.
Hello.
Then we have Cy Brand. Cy is Microsoft C++ developer advocate. Their background is in compilers and debuggers for embedded accelerators, but they're also interested in generic library design, metaprogramming, functional style C++, undefined behavior, and making our communities more welcoming and inclusive. Cy, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks very much.
Cy, could you quickly explain a monad for us since we have you back on?
I'm not going to make the obvious joke there, so yeah, don't even try.
I didn't know there was an obvious joke, honestly.
So the obvious joke is, no, you're just trying to make me say it.
Sorry, I honestly don't know, but don't worry about it. We'll continue on.
A monad is just a monoid in the category of endofunction. I can't even remember. It's like it's late, and I've been going for so long today. The technical definition.
No, sorry, I wasn't. I was just being ridiculous.
Okay. And last, we have Augustin Popa, who is a program manager at the C++ team at Microsoft, currently working on the VC package library manager, address sanitizer support for Windows, and acquisition of build tools. Augustin, welcome to the show.
Hey there.
Okay, so
I'm not going to ask you to explain a monad just for the record.
I should make everyone explain it. That can be the new intro. Everyone will give a different explanation. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we start going over all the Microsoft news, why don't we just talk a little bit about CppCon so far? Julia, I think this is your first CppCon, maybe at least your first with Microsoft. Is that right?
Yeah, this is my first ever CppCon, so I can't really compare it to what it's like to be there in person.
Mm-hmm.
I've really enjoyed it so far. I think Remo, the platform that they've been using to virtualize expo hall tables and exhibitor rooms and stuff, it's pretty cool. I'm not sure if we have as many attendees this year because it's virtual, but it's been a fun first experience for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like the Remo tables. I will say I wish more people would turn their cameras on because it seems like a lot of time they have this virtual hall and you see all these little tables and then you can see everyone's little avatar around the table. And you usually get like one or two tables where everyone's got their microphone and camera on.
Yeah.
But then just the rest of the hall is filled with people just sitting there, silently.
It becomes a magnet as soon as a couple of people are talking. Then it's like, boom, that table is full.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So, how about you? Are you enjoying the conference?
Yeah, I've had 3 talks and a lightning talk so far. So I had a talk every day of the conference, and I've also been doing the Code of Conduct team and the Microsoft booth. So yeah, it's been a lot. I think I've seen 2 other talks from other people so far, and it's day 4 of the conference. But yeah, it's been enjoyable. I've had some really, really great conversations. Like you said, there can be trouble finding people to chat to during the sessions, but when you do find a good group, you can have some really good talks, and you feel like you're back in that conference experience again, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Augustin? You enjoying the conference?
Yeah, I'm really happy that the conference is actually happening this year because I think for a while we were all wondering if there would even be a CppCon, and I'm really glad they found a solution through this remote platform, and I'm glad we still have so many talks to look at, and it's mostly the same. I mean, I guess the interactions with people are very different, and as was alluded to earlier, with just the online format just changes everything there. But still, it's nice that we can still have the conference. We have so many. The schedule is still really packed. I was wondering if that would be impacted as well, but there are lots and lots of talks out there. So I look forward to catching up to a couple of them on YouTube afterwards as well, because I spent a lot of time at the Microsoft booth in the expo hall, so I couldn't attend a lot of different talks, but I hope I can catch up with them afterwards.
Yeah, does anyone know the statistics on this? But my guess would be it's about 2/3 of a normal schedule, half to 2/3, something like that. It's still a lot.
Yeah, that feels about right. I mean, I think there's technically the same number of tracks, but not all the tracks are active at the same time in the same way that they are when it's a physical conference.
And we're ending like one session earlier than I think we
right.
would be.
Yeah.
Anyone have any highlights or favorite talks so far?
I loved watching the lightning talk that Sai just gave. It was really funny. It was about how many people we needed to slap a Google data center to power it for the rest of time. Is that right, Sai?
Yeah, that's it. It turns out that it's exactly one Google, which is 10 to the power of 100.
Yeah.
I missed that talk, so I was getting ready for this, but I'll have to go watch it.
Yeah. It was fun. I practiced it like literally 50 times today because I had to speak through it so fast because there was like so many physics equations to get through.
Yeah, it was very impressive.
Wow.
Anyone else have any highlights?
I really liked JF's talk about JIT compilation. It was like a brief history of JIT compilers, and like I have an interest in compilers and JIT compilation and things like that. So this was like going through a bunch of different papers and showing like where JIT compilers came from and how JIT compilation and ahead of time compilation is kind of a spectrum. It's not binary, and had a lot of really interesting references, things to read later. So, and JF's always a really dynamic presenter as well. So, I really enjoyed that one.
I feel like there's been a lot this year that just reminds us that there's nothing new, really.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, like Ben Dean gave a lightning talk on this programming language book, which was written, I don't know, like 50 years ago or something, and it was a survey of over 150 different programming languages, and so many of the ideas contained in there are things that we still talk about at the conference today. So yeah, that was really fascinating.
Yeah, and I'll say if you're interested in learning more about JITs, JF's talk was great, and then Ben Dean gave one about JITs in C++ and the possible things we might be able to do with it. Yeah.
I need to go back and watch that one still.
Yeah, I need to watch that one too.
Yeah. How about you, Augustin? Have any favorite talks? I know you said you spent a lot of time at the Microsoft booth.
Yeah, there was a talk given by one of my coworkers, Erica, and I remember getting spooked halfway through the talk because I was watching it, and then she sent me an instant message, and then I went, wait a minute, how are you sending me an instant message while you're presenting your talk? And then I remembered, oh yeah, this part's pre-recorded, but it looked so real. I couldn't tell. I completely forgot in the moment that it was pre-recorded. But yeah, it was an interesting talk on cross-platform development, talking about different pitfalls, talking about package managers, like system package managers, language package managers, CMake, other build systems. And there were just, it's always an interesting subject, I think, for us at Microsoft, since we've been working a lot on cross-platform tooling recently. And it's a big change from where we used to be some years ago.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Definitely. Well, I think that's probably a good segue to start talking about all the announcements that your team has made this week. How many talks in total were put on by Microsoft people?
Yeah, we had 10 talks.
10 talks,
overall,
okay.
Not including lightning talks.
And there's still one or two more tomorrow, probably?
There's still one tomorrow. It's on our new fuzzing tool. That's tomorrow, one of the last sessions, I think.
Okay. So I guess, do we want to start going over some of the big news
Yeah,
made in
Let's do
the
it.
first Visual Studio talk? Yes, you want to
sure.
start?
Yeah, I can give it a go. So the kind of major flagship announcements were a lot to do with conformance. The main ones being C++20 modules, which are now feature complete in MSVC, which we're really proud of. And that's including all of the most recent changes to modules and also some experimental tooling support in MS build. So, modules can have complex dependencies between them, and that might not just be in a single project. You might have dependencies on modules which are produced in some static library, and all of those things need to be built in some order. So the MS build has a dependency checker, so it will go through all of your modules, work out the dependencies between them, and make sure they're built in the right order for consumption. So we're really happy to have that support, and hope that people will go try it out. As well as modules, coroutines are now feature complete as well. So we had support for the coroutines TS for quite a while under the /await switch, but this stuff is now in the C++ latest switch. So we still do support the old TS style under await and the experimental /coroutine header, and then the new stuff is under C++ latest and the standard coroutine header. So we'd like people to upgrade when they can and try out the new features. We also have the support in the debugger, so you can set a breakpoint inside a coroutine, and when that's hit, then you'll see a reasonable call stack, which actually gives you information you might want rather than just being polluted with a bunch of extraneous coroutine nonsense, which is pretty cool. So give that a shot. I've been playing around with coroutines a lot recently, and tooling support will definitely help because there's so many complex callback mechanisms and things like that it really helps to be able to reason about what your coroutines are doing. As well as coroutines modules, we announced C11 and C17 conformance. That's C11, C17, not C++. This is something that people have been asking for a while, and now we have it. So this is all of the required features from C11, C17. There were some features in C99 which were required but then made optional for C11, like threads and atomics and things like that. So we haven't implemented those. Some of those are on our roadmaps. We do plan on implementing the threading and the atomics into our C support. So that should be coming. Those are our major feature complete things. Then we've been doing a ton of work on ranges. So we're about, I'd say, 95% complete on ranges. So it's good enough that you could go try it out, and most of the things which you would expect to be there will be there. And we're working hard on getting the last of them done. As far as the broader STL goes, I think we have implemented 84 of the features and have 24 left. The thing we're really pleased about is that last year we announced the STL was open source, and which we did on this show as well. And since then, more than 30 of our new C++20 features were actually contributed by people outside of Microsoft, which is really, really cool. So we're so pleased with all of the community engagement it's got, and that other people are coming in and helping make the library better and helping push the standard of C++ tooling forward for everyone. So we're really, really pleased with that. Please keep on submitting your pull requests and sending us your issues. So those are the major... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Out of curiosity, if there's someone listening and says, I would love to get involved right now, what are some of the things that you're looking for contributors for? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I don't, but we do have on the GitHub repo is at github.com/Microsoft/STL, and we do have, we use that as our issue tracker, and we have our roadmap there. So if you go have a look at the roadmap, see what's coming, see what needs implemented, and have a look at the issues, there might be some marked as good first issues to try out, things like that. So I'd recommend having a look at the GitHub repo as your first port of call.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, like, have there been any cases where, STL was going to go start working on a feature himself and then a pull request came through to go and finish that work? Or is there
I'm
some
sure
work
things like
to
that
split that
happen.
up? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like we try and be as transparent as possible on what we're working on. That's why we have like a fairly detailed roadmap.
Nice.
So we do try and minimize that. When we say it's an open source project, we really do mean it. Like we're treating it as a fully open source, transparent project. So yeah. Those are our main conformance things. Some of the things we're working on, static analysis. There was a talk from Sunny Chatterjee, who's one of our static analysis developers, on trying to close the gap between Rust and C++ for static analysis, which we're mainly doing through multiple different avenues of analysis. We have our static analysis, which is available in the IDE directly. And we have like kind-tidy integration, and we have linters. So there's a bunch of different areas we're looking at. And then, of course, more dynamic analysis like address sanitizer, which now supports both x86 and x64, and also debug mode, which it didn't last year. So we're still working on that. It's not quite, we still are saying it's experimental. It's not quite finished yet, but we're working hard on getting that done.
I don't think I mentioned on the show before, but I just want to say I've used the assign support since the x64 and debug was added, and it really helped me with a few problems I found in my project. So great stuff.
Yeah. Another thing is the control flow guard, which is something which we've had in we've actually contributed to LLVM. So we've done a lot of work in integrating LLVM stuff and Clang into our tooling, and now we've actually contributed some new analysis support to LLVM itself. So that's in upstream now. You can go try it out, and it's like a thing for enforcing control flow integrity.
Nice.
Yeah.
Definitely need to note that.
Yeah, I think as far as the like language tooling goes, of course, we're always improving our build time performance. We're really focused on trying to help people who have requirements on their iteration times, like game devs and things like that, who you just can't be waiting around for a build for way too long after you make a tiny change. So the most recent changes we made were we actually parallelized PDB creation, which should hopefully speed up a lot of link times by about 2 times on large projects. So we'd love to have data on that. If you if you upgrade the tools and you rebuild your projects, we'd love to hear how your build times are affected. And also we had last year, was it a year ago, or it was maybe 6 months ago, that I was on here with we were talking about C++ build insights.
Oh yeah, right.
Okay, yeah.
That was about 6 months ago, I think. Yeah.
Sounds right.
With Kevin Cadia, who was the developer on that. So build insights is a way of analyzing your build and generating traces. So that's one of the ways that you can try and work out where the bottlenecks are. For runtime performance, we've been doing work as well on, I think our newest optimizations, jump threading, which is if you have a bunch of, at the assembly level, if you have a bunch of jumps which are always going to be taken in the same order, then you can eliminate some of those intermediate jumps, which can just save you some time because, it's easier on things like the branch predictor. And then also we improved the code gen of our memset and optimizations around intrinsics and auto vectorization as well. So those are the main things in the compiler and standard library, and then we've done a bunch of work in the IDE as well. But maybe Augustin, do you want to talk about some of the VC package stuff?
Well, I was going to say, before we move on to the other announcements, I had a few questions. I'm curious about the C++ 20 module support. It's great to hear that we have, one of the compilers fully conforming with that. And I'm curious, has there been much work internally to use modules? Has it been used on any big projects that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, modules we've been developing them for a long time and utilizing them on, I know we are utilizing them on large internal projects. I don't know if I can say which ones.
Okay.
But yeah, we are using modules internally, and it's been, one of the things which has driven the both the standard of modules and our own implementation. Like the areas which we're wanting to build modules in are in many ways to help aid our development efforts. So we're applying them to real world projects and then feeding back that information into the standardization process.
Very cool. Awesome. Jason, you have any questions before we move on?
No, that was a ton. I don't think I have any questions on it though.
Okay, so yeah, Augustin, let's talk about VC package.
Sure. So we've been doing a lot of work on the VC package manager. We have really been looking at extending the different development scenarios that you can use the tool. VC package has always been in this interesting state where, unlike most Microsoft products, it's very popular with hobbyists and open source developers, but it hasn't made as much headway with professional developers, large enterprises, that kind of thing. So we've really been refocusing a little bit to add some functionality that perhaps would be more appreciated for professional developers, but I think will also still be very useful for just anybody, depending on how much flexibility you want in a package manager. So we've been so we kind of made a list of big features that people were asking for and that just make sense for a couple different scenarios. And two of them are now generally available. We have binary caching, and we have a new manifest that we support. So basically, for binary caching, the way VC package works traditionally is you can use it to acquire libraries from source and build them, but sometimes that can take too long because when you have to go through the whole build process, and if you're building a lot of dependencies or if you're building a particularly large set of libraries, like if you're building Boost, it can take a while, and you only really need to do this once per machine normally. But if you have, say, your own machine and you have a CI machine, or maybe you're running things in multiple containers, or maybe you have multiple developers on your team, and they each have to go through this process once, that can take a while. So with binary caching, essentially what you can do is you can cache those binaries after you've built them exactly once. You can put them in a place that all of the machines on your network can access, and then you can just acquire the pre-built binaries, and then it just takes seconds to get them in every environment from that point on.
Is it smart enough to make sure that all the build flags and everything are the same and platform and all that?
Yeah, so basically it just reuses the same logic VC package would normally use to install libraries on your local environment, where we look at what your platform is, we look at what kind of build you're requesting, your build settings, and what it will do is it basically checks the cache if something compatible already exists in the cache. If it doesn't exist, then it will have to do the build from source, and then it can populate the cache with it, so for later it'll be available. But if it is in the cache, then it just downloads that, and you don't have to go through the whole build process for that. So we just basically it's basically an optimization for not having to build as often, and hopefully only have to build once for any given build configuration and platform for your dependencies. So this was. We got a lot of feedback that people really wanted. It's kind of like our solution to people asking for, can we install pre-built dependencies, which you can't realistically have pre-built libraries for every single possible library, every single possible version, and resolving all the version conflicts and all the possible issues you can have with C++ dependencies. You end up with a very, very large catalog, but instead what we can do is we can make it easy to build that once and then just reuse that.
Okay.
And that's basically binary caching. And then with manifests, so again, historically with VC package, you have to run commands in a terminal or write a script that does that for you. You can say things like VC package install boost curl OpenSSL, and then you can specify your build configuration as desired. But with manifests, you can instead put your dependencies in a JSON file, and then they can get installed without you having to run those commands. We have support for MS Build and CMake projects, and the way it essentially works is you just write that file, and assuming, so let's use CMake an example, assuming that you're already pointing to the VC package CMake toolchain file so that CMake knows about VC package, then when you run the CMake generation step, it will automatically invoke VC package and it will automatically install your dependencies at that time. So then when you go to build, it should just work, and it will look at your build configurations in your CMake project, and it will make sure that you get dependencies that are compatible with that built on your machine, and then you should basically be good to go at that point. And that manifest file has a second use, which is when you're if you want to package a library for use in the VC package ecosystem, that still uses that format. So we have a file format called the control file today. We're kind of deprecating that, and we're moving towards this common manifest file.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we have some more features as well that we're working on to make it even easier for teams to be productive using VC package.
Right, so there's a few upcoming features too, which we can talk about.
Yeah, so we have one feature that has been requested for a very long time is versioning support. Mm-hmm. So the way VC package works today, we have this very large catalog of over 1,400 open source libraries, and we basically build that whole thing as part of our CI process to make sure that all the libraries are compatible with each other and there are no version conflicts and stuff like that. But the downside of that is that we're essentially dictating what version of the library you get when you do VC package install some library, which might not be desirable for some people, especially if you're only installing some small subset of the libraries. You know exactly where the version conflicts are. You know you're not going to have any problems, and you understand exactly what you're doing. You might want to be able to say, well, I want this version of this library and this other version of another library, or specify something like, well, I'll accept a library at least at this version, or the next one that works if the minimum one doesn't work. So we're trying to enable stuff like that with versioning support. So we're going to take our entire catalog, make the old versions that have historically been available in old versions of VC package available just for install even with the latest version. So you can pick and choose exactly what versions you want. If you want that level of control, you can still get the default behavior where we give you one if you don't really care what version you want. But you can pick and choose, and you can specify that in the manifest file as well. But that feature is something we're still working on completing. We're pretty close, but it's not available yet. And then we have another feature called Registries, which is us trying to answer the question of how should you bring your own libraries to the VC package ecosystem? So we have all these open source libraries, but then people have their own private libraries, or maybe they're using other open source libraries that aren't in the main catalog, or maybe they want to fork an open source library and really control it like within their organization to make sure that they run through their own process for security reasons and stuff like that, and maybe they patch it once in a while. So in that scenario, where we want to support something called registries, which a registry is like a catalog of libraries. So you can define your own catalogs and define your own libraries to be in that catalog. And you can reference libraries from multiple catalogs. You can get them from the public catalog that everyone has access to, or you can get them from your own private catalogs. And that way we hope to kind of unify the story of just installing any libraries that you might need, whether they're open source ones or not, and having one consistent experience for doing that.
That sounds very cool. So how exactly are the registries going to work? Are you just kind of giving a URL and saying like, I want to use OpenSSL from here instead of the one on GitHub or whatever?
So there are two. So first of all, there are two ways we're looking at. So we already actually have some very early, let's call it pre-alpha support for registries in file system format, where you can basically pick some folder, you can put a bunch of libraries there, and you can, and the idea is that you'll be able to use another JSON configuration file to essentially define that registry, define the libraries that are part of that, and just any metadata that's around that. And then you can reference, and you can also define which libraries from which registries take precedence. So for example, let's say you have your own private fork of Boost where you're making some patches. You can essentially define in that file that when somebody requests Boost from the vcpackage.json manifest file, actually give them my Boost. Don't give them the public Boost, because ours has some hotfix we threw in recently.
Cool.
So you can do stuff like that. And we're also working on support for Git registries, which brings it to the point where you can specify a Git repo of the library you want, and even the specific commit ID, and also including a lock file to be able to lock in and say, okay, make sure that anytime somebody installs the set of dependencies and runs vcpackage against the manifest file, don't update them or change their version on them so that they're consistent across all the machines, across all the environments, whether you're on your local machine or running builds in a continuous integration server, and just keep it all consistent. So we're still working on the implementation details, but that's kind of what is where we're at right now with the design.
Okay.
Sounds really helpful.
Yeah. And is this coming out like sometime next year, or do you think it'll be in the next update or something like that? Can you say?
Yeah, so for versioning and registries, I think initial experimental support for registries is pretty close, like next few months. I would expect it this year. Versioning, we're actually even closer. We're just finishing some of the implementation there and getting the catalog of older libraries versions populated. So we're actually hoping within a month or two for versioning, but that's at least the current timeline.
Okay.
So we're actually pretty close with these. We were actually hoping to get both of these features in time for CppCon. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough time, but we want to make sure we polish these features up and that we're happy with the quality before we go and make a big announcement about it. So we're still considering them in progress, but we have made a lot of we have done a lot of development on them.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious, how big is the team that Microsoft has devoted to VC Package?
So we have around 5 full-time engineers on
Wow.
it. There's myself as well as a program manager, and we have a couple of people that work on mostly maintaining the PRs for library updates and stuff like that, and tracking statistics and how the project is doing as well, that we're working with, and that's a partner team. So
Cool.
It's not a very big team, but it is an open source project, and we do get quite a few contributions as well, and that's what's really been keeping things. That's why we've been growing as fast as we have, and the catalog has been growing a lot over the years. We only started in 2016, so we're already at over 1,400 unique libraries. And also went, I think we started off as Windows only, and now of course we're on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So we're trying to support all the C++ developers out there and all their needs.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think with versioning as well, like, I think one of the things which people misunderstand about VC Package is the versioning model which we currently use. Like, it's not the case that the versioning support gives you like something which is always better than what we currently have. These two models are have upsides and downsides. Like what we currently have enables like a fully tested suite of libraries which have been tested against each other, and you know that if you check out a version of a package, that version and all of the things which it depends on, that whole chain of dependencies has been tested, and you can trust that it's good for at least, you know, how good their testing is. Whereas you don't get that from specifying your own version. So like these are two different use cases which now we're trying to support both of.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of this is really unique for C++, like compared to some other languages like say C#, because of course we have some people who also use something like NuGet, for example, for package management, but we really evolved VC package out of a need to solve some of these underlying problems for C++ developers, where you have to deal with version conflicts and building a variety of different open source libraries. There's not one process that you can follow for all of them. They're all different. If you go to all their Git repos, they may have different builder instructions, be supported for multiple build systems. Some of them might not be set up as well for the build system you're using, and that it can just take it can take some time to really figure out, okay, how do I actually get all of these working? And then even when you do build them, maybe they don't all work together. So with VC package, we try to solve all of that just from the beginning. But now we're really trying to expand because there's additional functionality that people need in specific scenarios.
Yeah, I tried recently to compile Nginx, the HTTP server for my NAS drive, which it runs on ARM, on a 32-bit ARM, and Nginx does not support cross-compilation. Like, I hate having to deal with these things. I want to just be able to build things and not have to like end up at 1 a.m. crying because like I'm trying to build on a 64-bit machine and building for a 32-bit machine and it thinks my pointers are the wrong size. Like, I don't want to deal with this.
Well, speaking of figuring out what compatibilities libraries have, I guess it's also worth pointing out we haven't really announced this anywhere yet, but we're also working on a website for VC package, and part of that is actually a search feature for the different packages that are there, and you'll be able to see, okay, which operating system is this compatible for, which targets are these compatible for, and hopefully that's helpful, because of course not all libraries are completely cross-platform and designed for every target out there, so hopefully that helps a little bit as hopefully it helps people explore different libraries and see what are their best options for what they need.
That sounds like a great tool for the ecosystem.
Yeah, we hope so.
Yeah. Okay, Julia, let's start talking about VS Code. I know you had some really big news this week too.
We did. So the first announcement is that the C++ extension came out of preview. So we released our first 1.0 release, which is really exciting. The extension had been in preview for over 4 years, I believe, and it's come a long way since it was first shipped with a tag parser IntelliSense experience. And coming out of preview and marking this release as 1.0, you might be wondering what that means. Mm-hmm. Basically, we believe the extension has the core language server functionality that we've envisioned. It does not by any means mean that we're stopping there. We have a lot more coming in the future that we're excited about. But we've been working to stabilize the extension for the past few years and believe it's gotten to a point of high quality and a large enough feature set where we can put that 1.0 stamp on it. And
awesome. And can you go over what exactly is included in the C++ extension? I know we've talked about it before.
Yeah, of course. So I kind of divide it into two categories. We have editing and debugging. And the team that I work most closely with focuses on the editing features, which includes IntelliSense, things like completion lists, parameter help, quick info, semantic colorization, some code navigation features like find all references, go to definition, go to declaration, things like that. We also have code formatting, and one of the new features of 1.0 is that we have the Visual C++ formatting engine in VS Code now, which essentially is the formatting engine in Visual Studio. So all of the C++ formatting options that you have in Visual Studio are now supported in VS Code. There's also editor config support for all these new settings, just to give customers some more flexibility with how they want to format their code. And
so
then
the editor config thing, that means if a team wants to use either Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, they could have that file checked into source and have like the same kind of experience between both?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So all of the naming conventions are the same between VS Code and Visual Studio for that scenario specifically. And then we have debugging support. So Visual Studio Code has a debugger UI, and it uses whichever debugger you have installed on your computer under the hood. So you can customize your debug launch configurations, but it's, you get to use that intuitive user experience from VS Code. And like on that same note, so the debugger uses the debugger that you have on your computer. The C++ extension uses whichever compiler you have installed on your computer to set up IntelliSense for your source files.
Okay. And is it able to detect any of that automatically? What kind of setup is involved in
Yeah,
doing all
so
that?
it'll check a few default locations for compiler and debugger on your system, but if you don't have your compiler in one of those default locations, then you can manually specify the path to the compiler that you want to use. You can also change your IntelliSense mode. So let's say you are compiling for a different architecture than the architecture of your host machine. You can specify that as an IntelliSense setting for the C++ extension so that it'll give you the proper IntelliSense for the architecture that you're compiling for.
Nice.
And I think since last time we spoke about VS Code as well, we improved the configuration of the debug launch settings, which is something which always annoyed me. Like I would try and launch and debug something, and like I'd just stare at the settings page and be like, what do I have to know?
Right, yeah.
It's much easier to use now.
It is much easier. I think they are able to, pre-populate as many, more things now. And we also have acquired the Cmaketools extension within the past year, and Cmaketools makes the configuration process very simple for CMake projects. You don't need to look at any of those JSON settings files yourself at all. So if you are not using the Cmaketools extension, then you would be setting up your build task and your launch configuration through these JSON files. But with Cmaketools, it completely abstracts that and will set up that build and debug configuration under the hood for you.
Yeah, the Cmaketools used to be developed by Vector Bool, who did an incredible job of getting it to where it was. But it's still developed as an open source project. It's just we have we're doing the primary maintenance of it.
Even if you're not a CMake user, one feature I like, it's not a new feature, but it I think it was added in the past year or year and a half, is the build and debug active file. So you can start with just like one CPP file, one Hello World project. Let's say you're a student trying C++ for the first time, or you're somebody who's trying to evaluate Visual Studio Code, see if it's good for you. You can just start with the one file. You don't have to have a build system set up or anything. You can just right-click and say build and debug active file, assuming you have your compiler and debugger, and then it'll just confirm, okay, so you want to use this compiler and this debugger, and then it will just set up some default configuration for you, and you should be able to just test it out without any additional work. Really nice. So that's like close to the Visual Studio IDE level kind of experience, which is really nice.
Yeah, I use that all the time if I just want to test out something in like a small project. Just make a file in Visual Studio Code, hit build, go.
Yeah, it's like less than 30 seconds to get everything set up, and most of it is writing your C++ file.
I just leave my own compiler explorer instance running for those tests.
Yeah, I mean that's what I do for most things. But I use the compiler explorer online for most things, but then sometimes I'm trying out like new versions of MSVC and things like that, which aren't on Compiler Explorer yet. We are working on that, by the way. Some people have been asking me when we're going to get the most recent versions of the compiler on the upstream Compiler Explorer. People are looking at it. I do want to get them up there. Like people should be able to play with the most recent toys and things like that without having to pull down everything.
You're talking about trying to get like preview builds up there?
It's out of date of even release builds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's out of date release builds. Yeah, I can't remember what the most recent one is, but yeah, it's
like
not that. And yeah, and compared to like Clang and GCC, where they literally have trunk in Compiler Explorer, it's miles away. So yeah, I'd like to. I'd like to have that remedied. That would be nice.
Julia, I've got a question I like to bring up every time Visual Studio Code comes up, and I feel like it just becomes more and more relevant each time because you keep adding more and more C++ features to it. Where's the line between VS Code and Visual Studio? Who are you targeting?
A good question. So for VS Code, we're targeting Linux and Mac customers. We're saying if you're on Linux and you're on Mac, then VS Code is the way to go. And whereas Windows, we would recommend using Visual Studio IDE for a more extensive experience. But yeah, that is a good question. And we actually are beginning to do some integration work with Visual Studio, which will enable us to light up some of the remaining features in VS Code that are not there that are in Visual Studio, like such as call hierarchy, for example. That's another one of our top feature asks that will come after we do some of this integration work. But that is a good question, and I think it's one of those things where we don't have, a exact line that we're drawing, like this feature VS Code, this feature only Visual Studio. I think we will continue to listen to what our customers want in Visual Studio and adapt the product based off their feedback. We don't actually have that much overlap in our user base between VS Code and Visual Studio.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
I have both. I use both all the time.
Yeah, well, you're an MVP though.
That's true.
Yeah, I think as far as the line goes, like Julia says, there's no hard line, but we still do want to be able to say that Visual Studio should give you the more a more lightweight editing experience, which is what some people want, and Visual Studio should be a more fully featured IDE. So yeah, those are fuzzy definitions, kind of by design, but that's kind of the ballpark which we want to aim for.
And even on the Visual Studio side, the lines are getting blurred in terms of, Visual Studio is this big, comprehensive tool that comes with all this stuff built in. But now we're having conversations about things like, okay, should we really be shipping this much stuff in the MSVC toolset in Visual Studio? Can we decouple it further? Can we break things down by targets? Can we maybe start with x64 support, and then if you want x86, that can be an optional package. You have to check it in the installer. We're thinking about things like that. We don't have that in right now, but those are just the kinds of conversations we're having because we recognize that there is value in having something that's smaller and lightweight, and maybe gives you more targeted things that you need, and then you can extend that and add other packages as needed. And even if we look at the evolution of the Visual Studio installer, when 2017 came out, the 2015 installer had way fewer options and checkboxes for things than 2017, because we were trying to really break things down and give people more flexibility in what exactly they want on their system. And I know that we've been doing some work looking at both MSVC and the Windows 10 SDK to think about how can we break this down and install smaller stuff for people.
It gets better every year, but it's still a little bit of a pain point when you're like, I just need that version of the compiler on my CI.
Right.
Like, that's all I want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We definitely want to make that a bit easier going forward.
Okay. Is there anything else, any kind of big announcements that happened this week that we haven't gone over yet that you want to?
One thing we haven't talked about is code spaces,
Okay.
which is the idea is this is a GitHub code spaces. The idea is it should be like an instant developer environment. So you have like a GitHub repo and you hit a button and it opens a code space either in like an online editor or in your own local machine, and then you have your whole development environment set up and you can edit the project, you can build it, you can run it without having to install anything on your own machine. So the benefits there are like if you have a project which takes a bunch of resources, then you can use, this is all built with like cloud environments, so you're not having to use any of your own system resources for like building and running this stuff. Also, it means that you can access your code from anywhere, like if you're stuck somewhere or traveling or whatever. If you're on a train, if you're ever on a train again, then
yeah, we don't travel anymore.
Yeah, then you could access your code and do development. Also, one of the things which I think is most interesting is like onboarding people, like getting we do a bunch of surveys of, how long does it take you to set up your development environment when you join a team? Or, if you're just want to contribute some small feature to a project, like how long does it take you to get build environment set up, install all the dependencies and things like that? And for some people, it's literally days. And
Goodness.
that's just a huge pain point. So if you can just click a button and have a developer environment ready to go, then that's much better than a few days.
And to add to that, sorry, go first.
No, I was just going to say I was playing around with the VS Code code spaces experience, and I just am still blown away every time I open VS Code in the browser and you have the full VS Code UI. You can use the debugger. You can use like every feature. All of the feature sets of VS Code are there available in the browser. It's amazing. You could open it from your iPad. Our coworker was able to connect to code spaces from his car, from his Tesla, from the screen of his car. It's really cool.
Oh my god.
I feel like I'm totally missing something here now. How do you launch code spaces in GitHub?
So it's currently, there's a sign up, so it's not like fully open yet.
Okay.
If you go to aka.ms/codespaces-set sign up, then that'll take you there.
So it's preview. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's an amazing tool that we can't use just yet. Is there a release date announced at all?
I think you can sign up for the preview for VS Code at least. I believe that's public preview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can definitely try it. It's just not considered finished yet. We're still doing some work on that. But it's really an amazing thing because we're really going in the direction where you can just go on GitHub, find some repo, and then just open it in Visual Studio Code in the same browser, and you can just start playing around with it. And it essentially just creates like your own private fork of that for you to be able to play around with.
And this works with C++, I assume.
Yeah, it's not just C++. It goes
Right.
beyond that even. But yeah, we've been doing a ton of work to get the C++ support there. And yeah, we've come really far. So we're quite happy with it.
Yeah, it's currently, we say it's in limited beta access. So if you can request early access on GitHub, and it will be available to a smaller set of users. So yeah, if you're interested, you can go and sign up and see if you can get access, give it a shot.
I think Rob is signing up right now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out. Okay, well, we went over a lot. Anything else before we let all of you go?
I do have one more announcement, which is
Sure.
that we have Makefile support coming to VS Code very soon.
Oh.
And so we're working on a new extension. It'll be called Makefile Tools, so very similar in nature to the Cmaketools extension, basically providing configuration, builds, debug support for Makefile projects. And we'll be releasing the beta version of this hopefully within the next few weeks. And I think, something we've been thinking about long term is will we combine our Cmaketools extension, our Cmaketools extension, and the C++ extension so that it just comes with this native build functionality out of the box. But we're releasing it for now as a separate extension, hopefully in the next few weeks.
That's interesting. I mean, CLion is also working on a Makefiles extension.
Yes.
Which, like, for me personally, I'm like, who needs that? Except for the one time every 5 years that I'm like, I need that right now.
Yeah, suddenly I need to build like these 10 Linux tools and all their dependencies, and they all use auto tools.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was one of our reasonings for, shipping this as a separate extension and just, using it as a way to start that dialogue with the Makefile community and see how they are using Makefile, why they're using it, and if it's something that people express a lot of interest in, then we know, okay, this is worth pursuing, worth maintaining. But yeah, we have those same questions as well.
And one other thing that we're working on, I guess, and this also ties to Visual Studio Code, we're working on better VC package integration. To the point that so Julia actually demoed this as well in her talk, which was like a preview because it's not actually out yet. But we are working on an experience to manage dependencies in the VS Code UI, like in the GUI, through VC package. Actually shipping the VC package tool itself as a binary inside the C++ extension. So when you install the C++ extension, you can already start installing libraries right off the bat. And we're also exploring a similar thing for Visual Studio, although we haven't done the work there. So it'll be a bit farther out to get the Visual Studio integration. But yeah, we want people to be able to have the package manager built in as part of their IDE or editor.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, like in Visual Studio, there's still some integration already where you can, like if you have a CMake project and you have a find package or something, then if the package isn't installed and it is available in VC package, then you get a little tooltip and you can install it right from there. This would be something like if you're familiar with some of the tooling for Python, where you can just like install, you can get like a list of packages and install something from your sidebar.
Right, yeah. We already have some integration with VC package. If you install VC package yourself separately, and have an installer, you can install libraries when we know when you do a pound include and there's a squiggle because we don't know where the file is, you can install that way. But this way you don't even have to do the step of installing VC package. You can just have that already.
Sounds great. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today, and hope you enjoy the last day of the conference tomorrow.
Yeah, you too.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks.